Hello and welcome to Skepticus. This is your boy, Adam of NOLA. There's a certain kind of story that gets told a lot in the United States. You've probably heard it. It's woven into political speeches, bellowed from pulpits, and even printed on bumper stickers. The story is pretty simple. It goes like this: America is great, or needs to become great again. And it is great because it's a nation that believes in God. We are, in the words of the faithful, a Christian nation, a nation that believes in God. Our success, our prosperity, our freedom, it's all a blessing, a direct result of our collective piety. Now, following this narrative, it insists that without a firm belief in a divine judge, a cosmic hall monitor watching our every move, society itself would crumble. Morality would evaporate. We'd descend into a chaotic, dog-eat-dog world of crime, despair, and misery. Religion, specifically the brand that is espoused from Christianity, is presented as the essential ingredient, the load-bearing wall that holds up the entire structure of Western civilization. It's a powerful story, and as a skeptic, it's one that I rather enjoy because it's also a testable hypothesis. You see, if it's true that a society's health, wealth, and happiness are directly linked to its level of religious belief, then we should be able to see that in the data. The most godly nations should, logically, be the best places to live. They should be safer, healthier, wealthier, and overall better educated. So today we're going to put that hypothesis to the test. We're staging a heavyweight title fight for the soul of civilization. In one corner, weighing in with a staggering percentage of its population believing in the God of Abraham, we have the reigning champion of religiosity in the developed world, the United States of America. And in the other corner, a challenger from the East, a nation of stunning technological advancement and ancient traditions, but one where God has been largely absent from public life for decades. A country where the overwhelming majority of people say that religion is unimportant in their lives. I'm talking about the secular powerhouse that is Japan. Now, I chose Japan for this analogy or this head-to-head matchup because a lot of times when we talk about secular nations that are seemingly better off or happier than America, a lot of times we'll point to countries like Norway or Sweden or Iceland. But the retort I hear a lot of times from Christians on this is that, well, those are still Christian nations. Even if the countries today have very low levels of religiosity, when they were religious, they were primarily Christian nations. But Japan has never been a Christian nation. Even at its most religious point, whenever that was, they have never embraced Christianity by a long stretch. So I wanted to pick a country for comparison that really had nothing to do with Western and or Christian traditions. So that's why we're going with Japan. We're going to put these two nations head to head. First, we'll establish just how massive the God gap between them really is. And then we're going to go through the scorecards, round by round, on everything that matters: life, death, money, crime, happiness, and knowledge. The question that we're looking at today is really very simple. Does the evidence show that the blessed nation is actually better off? Or is the story that religious Americans tell themselves just that? A story. The answer might surprise you, or if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, maybe it won't surprise you at all. But the details, oh, the details, they are fascinating. So let's get into it. Now, before we can compare these two societies, we need to be absolutely certain about our premise. Is the US really that religious? And is Japan really that secular? The answer is a resounding yes, and the numbers are not really subtle. Let's start with the US. According to a 2018 Pew Research Center study, about 80% of Americans say that they believe in God. Now, about 56% say that they believe in God as described in the Bible, while the others believe in some other higher power. But still, that's a huge number. When asked about the importance of religion in their daily lives, a solid 53% of Americans say that it is, quote, very important, unquote. You can basically go to any other wealthy, developed Western nation, the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, and those numbers are in the basement by comparison. America is a massive outlier. We are the undisputed champions of first world piety. So let's look at Japan. The data is almost a perfect mirror image, according to the World Values Survey. When asked if they believe in God, only about 30 to 35% of Japanese people say yes. But even that number is likely inflated. When you ask a more direct question, like in a 2018 survey by the NHK Broadcasting Culture Research Institute, you find that only 12% identify with a specific organized religion. The vast majority, around 75%, practice what is sometimes called cultural religion. And this is really an important distinction because someone in the comments is already typing, but what about Shintoism and what about Buddhism in Japan? And it's true that most Japanese people will visit a Shinto shrine for New Year's or have a Buddhist funeral. These are cultural traditions, rituals woven into the fabric of life, but it's not theism. It is not belief as any American sees it. Think of it like an American who makes a joke about karma being a bitch, or an atheist putting up a Christmas tree. These are cultural habits, not statements of faith. The average Japanese person does not believe that a pantheon of Shinto kami are actually intervening in their lives, or that they need to appease a deity to have a moral compass. When you ask the same question as in the US, how important is religion in your daily life? The numbers are stark. In Japan, only 10% say that it's, quote, very important, unquote. Remember, the US was 53%. That's not just a small difference, it's a chasm. So let's be clear. By the standards of an American evangelical, Japan is a profoundly godless place. It is a society that has, for all intents and purposes, decided to navigate the complexities of modern life without a divine co-pilot. So the premise is established. We have Team God-fearing versus Team Godless. Now, let the games begin. For round one, we're going straight to the most fundamental metrics of a society's health. Are its people living long, healthy lives? And are they able to protect their most vulnerable? This is life and death stuff. First up, let's look at life expectancy. Who gets to stick around on this planet as long as possible? Well, in Japan, the average life expectancy at birth is approximately 84.4 years. That's one of the absolute highest in the entire world. They are global leaders in longevity. And in the United States, it's 77.3 years. Let me say that again. The average person in secular Japan lives more than 7 years longer than the average person in the devout United States. 7 years. That's enough time to get a bachelor's and a master's degree. It's enough time to watch a child go from first grade to middle school. It's not a small gap. While American politicians are offering thoughts and prayers for people's health, Japan has built a system based on diet, lifestyle, and universal health care that actually delivers results. The winner of this round is decidedly Japan by a landslide. Next up is a metric that, for me, is one of the most telling signs of a society's true values: infant mortality. This measures the number of deaths of infants under 1 year old per 1,000 live births. It's a brutal, heartbreaking statistic, and it's a direct reflection of a country's public health, prenatal care, and societal support systems. In the United States, the self-proclaimed pro-life nation, the country where politicians weep crocodile tears over the sanctity of life from conception, the infant mortality rate is 5.4 deaths per 1,000 live births. Now let's look at Japan. This secular, morally adrift society, well, their infant mortality rate is 1.6 deaths per 1,000 live births. The United States has an infant mortality rate that is more than 3 times higher than Japan's. Let that sink in. For every 1,000 babies born, somewhere from 3 to 4 more will die in the US than in Japan before their first birthday. How is that possible in the greatest, most blessed country on earth? It's because one country prioritizes sloganeering about life, while the other prioritizes the systems and policies that actually sustain life. The winner here is Japan in a devastating knockout. Finally, let's look at keeping people safe from each other. Let's talk about the homicide rate. How often are citizens killing each other? The United States, a nation where thou shalt not kill is supposedly a foundational moral principle, has an intentional homicide rate of around 6.4 per 100,000 people. And Japan? The nation without a divine commandment telling them not to murder? Well, their homicide rate is 0.2 per 100,000 people. 6.4 in the US versus 0.2 in Japan. You're not mishearing that. The US homicide rate isn't double or triple Japan's. It's more than 30 times higher. An American is, statistically speaking, over 3,000% more likely to be murdered than a Japanese person. In an average year, the entire country of Japan, with 125 million people, might see fewer than 300 homicides. The city of Chicago alone often surpasses that number. This is not even a contest. It's a massacre, pun intended. One nation is flooded with guns and a culture of violence often justified with righteous religious rhetoric, and the other is, well, not. The winner here, hands down, is Japan. It's not even the same sport. They're not even playing in the same arena. So after round one, the scorecard is grim on the fundamental issues of living a long life, surviving infancy, and, not getting murdered. The secular nation is wiping the floor with God's supposed chosen country. But maybe those are just outliers. Let's look at the broader social fabric. A healthy society is about more than just not dying. It's about knowledge, trust, and freedom. So let's look at education and crime. First, let's talk about who has the smarter kids, or at least the better educated ones. We can look at the PISA scores. That's the Program for International Student Assessment, a worldwide study that tests 15-year-olds in reading, mathematics, and science. It's essentially the Olympics of education. In the most recent PISA results, in math, Japan ranks in the top 5 globally. The United States, 35th. In science, Japan is in the top 5. The United States, 16th. In reading, Japan is in the top 15. The United States, 13th. We're close on one of them, I'll give us that. But overall, it's not really a competition. Japanese students are, on average, years ahead of their American counterparts in key subjects. One country values education, funds it, respects its teachers, and has a culture that prizes learning. The other is busy arguing about whether or not to teach evolution in science class and trying to ban books from school libraries. You tell me which approach you think God would prefer. The winner here is pretty clear. It's Japan. Next, let's broaden our look at crime beyond just homicide. Let's look at the incarceration rate. Who is locking up more of its own citizens? This is perhaps the most damning statistic for all of the American side. The United States has the highest incarceration rate of any country on earth. It's not even close. We have about 531 prisoners per 100,000 people. To put it another way, we have less than 5% of the world's population, but more than 20% of the world's prisoners. It really gives you another take on the phrase land of the free. And Japan? They have 36 prisoners per 100,000 people. That was 531 prisoners per 100,000 in the US and 36 per 100,000 in Japan. Let me put a very fine point on this. The Christian nation locks up citizens at a rate nearly 15 times higher than the godless one. This points to 1,000 different failures. Failures in the justice system, in social safety nets, in education, in mental health care. But most of all, it points to a staggering hypocrisy. A nation that preaches forgiveness and redemption has built the most punitive, sprawling prison system in human history. Meanwhile, the society that doesn't believe in divine judgment seems to have figured out how to create a society where fewer people need to be judged in the first place. Winner, Japan. Utterly. Well, this isn't looking too good for Team God-fearing USA now, is it? They're getting pummeled on the basics of life, safety, and education. But what about the almighty dollar? Surely the nation blessed by God and fueled by the Protestant work ethic is richer and happier, right? Right? How would you like to be one of my advisors? I'm using Skepticus's memberships as a way to allow you to have a voice in the content and the direction of this channel. I hope to see you in the membership pool, and I want to hear your voice in what Skepticus is doing going forward. This is where the prosperity gospel folks get really excited. The idea that faith leads to wealth. So let's look at the numbers. First, let's talk about income and GDP per capita. Now, on this one metric, the US does appear to have quite a lead. US GDP per capita is around $80,000, while Japan's is closer to $42,000. With a side note here that these numbers fluctuate, but the US is consistently higher. Average disposable income is also higher in the US. So, case closed, right? The religious country is richer. Well, not so fast. Averages can be deceiving, especially when you have income equality. A country's Gini coefficient is a measure of wealth distribution. A score of 0 is perfect equality, which would mean that everyone has the exact same income. And a score of 1 is maximum inequality, which would mean that one person has all the monies. The United States has a Gini coefficient of about 0.4. This is one of the highest in the developed world. We have staggering Gilded Age levels of inequality. A few people at the top are doing phenomenally well, which pulls that average income number way up. And what about Japan's Gini coefficient? Well, it's about 0.33. It's a much more egalitarian society. The gap between the richest and the poorest is significantly smaller. So while the average might be lower, the wealth is shared far more evenly. It's the difference between a dinner party where one guy gets a 10-pound steak and everyone else gets a bread roll versus a party where everyone gets a decent-sized burger. I know which party that I'd rather be at. So this one, if you want to call this a win for the US, I think it is most honestly determined to be a draw. I would lean towards Japan for its fairness, but I do understand in terms of raw income and disposable income, the US is higher on average than Japan. But remember, those averages get highly skewed by the income inequality in this country. So I'm calling that a draw between the US and Japan. But money isn't just about how much you make. It's about what it buys you in terms of quality of life, which leads us to the World Happiness Report. This is a massive annual survey that asks people around the globe to rate their own life satisfaction. It takes into account things like GDP, social support, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and corruption. In the 2024 report, out of about 140 countries, Japan ranked 51st. Not amazing, but not terrible. And the United States? Well, the land of boundless opportunity and divine blessing ranked 23rd. Okay, so clearly the US wins this one on paper. But hold on. The US has been plummeting in the rankings, especially among young people, while many other developed nations are stable or rising. And despite our higher GDP, we're still not even in the top 20. Countries like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden, all highly secular, by the way, consistently dominate the top spots. The fact that the US, with all of its immense wealth, can't crack the top 20 while being the most religious of the bunch is a massive red flag for the faith equals happiness argument. So we'll give the winner here to the US, but it comes with a huge asterisk next to it. But let's talk about something that directly contributes to happiness and well-being, the social safety net. What happens when you get sick, have a baby, or just want to take a vacation? In Japan, they have a system of universal healthcare. Everyone is covered. In the US, we have a mess, a wildly expensive, inefficient system that leaves millions uninsured or underinsured, and where a single illness can lead to financial ruin. Medical debt is a uniquely American nightmare. When it comes to having a child, Japan mandates 14 weeks of maternity leave, and parents can take up to a year of partially paid leave. In the United States, there is zero federally mandated paid maternity leave. Zero. We are one of only 6 countries in the world without it. How about paid vacation? Well, Japanese law requires a minimum of 10 paid vacation days for full-time workers, which increases with seniority. In the United States, well, there are 0 mandated paid vacation days. Your boss doesn't have to give you a single day off. Now, I do understand that many Americans do get paid time off. That is purely based upon your value in the marketplace and your ability to negotiate with your employer. None of it is mandated. And there are, of course, many people, especially on the lower rungs of society, who do not get any paid time off at any time of the year. So yes, the average American might make more money, but they are also one bad diagnosis, one car accident, or one new baby away from potential catastrophe, with less time to reset and recover. The Japanese system is designed for stability. The American system is designed for high-stakes gambling. So overall, when it comes to the quality of life infrastructure, I have to say that Japan is still the winner, and it's not even that close. Now, at this point, I know what the defenders of American exceptionalism are screaming at their screens. I can hear the arguments already, and in the spirit of good skepticism, we have to address them. So let's look at the first possible counter-argument. What about Japan's suicide rate? This is the classic comeback. For a long time, Japan did have a notoriously high suicide rate, far higher than the US. But here's the thing about data. It changes. Over the last 15 years, Japan has made a concerted national effort to tackle this problem, investing heavily in mental health support. And it's worked. Their suicide rate has fallen by nearly 40% from its peak. Meanwhile, in the United States, the suicide rate has been steadily increasing over the exact same period. As of the latest data, the suicide rate in the US is around 14.1 people per 100,000. In Japan, it has dropped to around 15.4 per 100,000. The gap has closed to the point of being nearly identical. The godless country identified a major social problem and has been successfully fixing it. The godly country has a similar problem that is actively getting worse. This is not the winning argument that it used to be. The next counter argument could be that Japan is a homogenous society. You can't compare it to someplace as diverse as America. This is the get out of jail free card that gets played in every one of these comparisons. And it's a lazy, intellectually bankrupt, and potentially racist cop-out. First of all, while Japan is more homogenous than the US, it's not a monolith. It has its own minority groups and social stratifications. But more importantly, this argument is an excuse, not an explanation. Is the suggestion that diversity causes higher infant mortality? That a multi-ethnic society is incapable of achieving low crime rates? That having people from different backgrounds means you can't build an effective public education system? Of course not. Canada is an incredibly diverse, multicultural society. So is Australia, so is New Zealand, and they all outperform the United States on most of these metrics. Pointing to diversity is often just a polite way of avoiding a hard look at our own policy failures. It's a way of saying our problems are too complicated to solve, when in reality, they're just too politically inconvenient to solve. Another potential counter-argument would be, well, they work themselves to death. What about karoshi? Yes, Japan has a well-documented problem with a culture of overwork, leading to deaths from strokes and heart attacks, a phenomenon that they call karoshi. It's a serious issue. But is America really in a position to judge? We have our own toxic hustle culture where people are lionized for working 80-hour weeks. Millions of Americans have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, with no safety net to catch them. We have a massive problem with stress-related illness, heart disease, and an opioid crisis that was born out of despair. To be fair, both countries have deep-seated problems with work-life balance. But at least in Japan, if you get sick from overwork, you won't go bankrupt from the hospital bill. One culture's problem is a tragedy. The other's is a tragedy compounded by systemic cruelty. So where does that leave us? We started with a simple hypothesis, the bedrock claim of the American religious right, that a godly Christian society is a better, healthier, more prosperous society. We took that claim and we tested it against the data, comparing the hyper-religious USA to the profoundly secular Japan. And what did we find? On measure after measure, the secular nation of Japan comes out ahead. Its people live longer. Their babies are more likely to survive their first year. They are exponentially less likely to be murdered or thrown in prison. Their children receive a better education. Their society is more equal and enjoys a far more robust social safety net. The United States, for all of its wealth and its prayers, is plagued by violence, inequality, poor health outcomes, and a failing social support system. We lead in incarceration, infant mortality among developed nations, and medical bankruptcy. The evidence is overwhelming. The data is clear. The hypothesis that being a Christian nation or a godly nation somehow makes you more prosperous is demonstrably false. There is absolutely no statistical correlation between a society's religiosity and its well-being. In fact, in this case, the correlation is negative. The more religious country is, by almost every objective measure, worse off. Now, to be fair, does this mean that religion causes these bad outcomes? Not necessarily. That's a much more complex question, I will freely admit. But it absolutely, unequivocally proves that religion is not necessary for good, moral, healthy, and thriving society. It proves that morality does not come from a holy book. It comes from empathy. Safety does not come from a divine watchdog. It comes from good policy. Health does not come from prayer. It comes from science and systems that deliver that science to everyone in an efficient manner. Japan is not a perfect society. No country is. But it stands as a powerful, living refutation of the arrogant claim that a nation needs God to be good. It turns out that humanism, a focus on shared well-being, and a commitment to reason and evidence can build a society that is, by the numbers, far more successful at the fundamental task of keeping its citizens alive, safe, and well. Maybe, just maybe, the path to a better world isn't found by looking up to the heavens, but by looking across at each other and deciding to build it ourselves. And one more time, I will say that I picked Japan specifically because I hear so much of this crap that somehow Christianity is the basis for all of the good things in our society, in our country, even in the Western world as a whole. They make it sound as though without the influence of not just God, but the Christian God, Yahweh, that all of society would somehow just be a ravenous pit of depravity and crime and despair and sadness. But it's just such bullshit. I'm not saying that all of America's problems are coming because of our religions. And I'm not saying that all of Japan's success comes from its lack of religion. But I am telling you this, that the sooner you get off of this fantasy that Christianity is what makes everything good, the sooner you can actually start looking with an honest eye at the problems in our own world, in our own country, and in our own community. And sometimes those solutions, in fact, I would argue often those solutions have nothing to do with religion. Thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed another episode here of Cynical Sermons. I am, as always, your host, Adam of NOLA. If I have screwed anything up, or if God wants to tell me why Japan sucks and America's great, he is more than welcome to chime in at any moment and have his say. Jeebus, Holy Spirit, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny. Yeah, he can never be bothered to speak up. Thank you for being here. I hope to see you on future videos, but until I do, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.